Welcome to Deep Treks. I'm Dan Shipton, and this is our Tuesday edition of Deep Treks. We are studying the book of James right now in our Bible studies with Deep Treks, and so we are going to be trekking today into James chapter 1, beginning at verse 13. It says, "When tempted, no one should say, 'God is tempting me.' For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when by his own evil desire he is dragged away and enticed. And then afterwards, his desire has been conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He gives to us the birth through the word and the truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created." And so today we are looking at James chapter 1, and we are looking at temptation. And I think James defines quite well where temptation comes from. A lot of people, for those people who are my age and older, you might remember back in the 70s when I was a kid. I know back in the 70s, Flip Wilson was still around, and he was, one of his jokes, one of his running jokes was, "The devil made me do it." He used to say that on his show a lot. "The devil made me do it. The devil made me do it." Well, the truth of the matter is the devil doesn't make us do anything. Now, I will say the devil or evil does sometimes put its temptation out in front of us. But that's because we already have prone weaknesses in certain areas of our life. And that's what James is talking about here. He's not saying that the evil one never tempts us, but what he's saying is most often we are tempted by our own desires, which give birth to sin. And I've thought about this over the years, and I've really thought seriously about this. And you even think back to Adam and Eve and original sin. Satan didn't make them eat the fruit that God said don't eat. He made the fruit attractive by saying, "Did God really say this? Isn't that fruit attractive?" And he basically made them question God. That's all he did. He brought the question to their mind, and they did the rest. They already saw the fruit as desirous. They already probably had some of these questions in mind. And even going back beyond that, if you look at the way Scripture talks about like the fall of Satan, the fall of Lucifer, if you will, whatever you want to look at, whether that's the king of Babylon, or as some people say, that's a reference to the fall of Satan, it doesn't begin with God, and it doesn't begin with someone else. It begins within that angelic being who chose to go against God and make themselves higher. You see, whenever we choose to put ourselves in the place of God, and we give in to that kind of temptation, and we choose what is right, and we choose it in our own eyes, then we are often misled and led into sin. It's our natural bent. And I've had this discussion so many times over my lifetime, because people will say, no, that's not the way it is. Human beings are naturally good. And I always sit there and scratch my head. I wonder, are they human beings? Did they grow up like you and I did? Because I'll tell you right now, I have kids and grandkids, and I've been around kids' ministries a lot of my life. And I've never had to teach a kid to lie. They do it naturally. I've never had to teach a kid to go beat up another kid because he wanted that toy. They do it naturally. I've seen 1 and 2-year-olds fight over toys, and I've seen them lie about it when you try to call them out. And so to me, it's like this natural bent within humanity that puts us to want to do our will over anybody else's will, to break the rules, to do what I want for myself. And so those people that say human beings are just naturally good, I look at it and go, what world are you living in? We've had wars since the beginning of time. You go back to Cain and Abel. They were fighting. The first 2 children were fighting, according to the Bible. Why? Because we get our own ideas of how to worship God, and that's what that fight was about. And one thought the other one was chosen more than himself, and so he kills his brother. And throughout history, we see over and over the sins of the world from Adam and Eve all the way down to you and I and the things we do. And James is calling us out on it and saying, hey, don't blame God for temptation. And some people, I've even heard them say that. Some of us will say, okay, I get Flip Wilson and saying, evil and the evil one wants us to trip up. But I've heard people say it's God's fault. He put this into, he made me like this. He made me like this. He made me with this desire to go get drunk all the time. He made me like that. You know what? There is nothing in the world that we are made to do except to glorify God. That's what the original intent of humanity was to glorify God, because we were made in his image. But we were given free will. And with free will means we've got the choice to choose right or to choose wrong. We've got the choice to be humble as Christ did. He humbled himself to come to earth. On our behalf, he died for us, and he gave in to the will of God. Or we could put our will first, our desires first. And James says right here, nobody can say it's God's fault. Instead, he says God only brings good things, and we'll talk more about that later in the week. But right now, I just want us to understand, when it comes to temptation, temptation begins in here and in here, in our hearts and in our minds. This is why over in Romans chapter 12, when Paul is talking to the Romans, he tells them that we have to renew our minds. He says in verse 1 and 2 of chapter 12 of Romans, Paul says this, and this is my favorite verses from the Bible. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And the only way we can truly know the will of God is to stay close to God, to stay in his word. If we're going to try to do something, or we want to do something, and it isn't matching up to his word, then we know it's not in his will. I've heard people give some wild things, and you and I probably have all heard this. There's weird things out there on the internet, and somebody say, well, God told me to do this, or God told me that this person was supposed to marry me, and now I'm mad because they didn't. You know what? God doesn't work that way. We have choices to make. He directs our lives, and the only way we'll know God's will is to stay close to him. And God's will is that we love others, that we try to be merciful to others, just treat them the way he would treat us. And so today, as we wrap up, yes, temptation hits us all. God is the way to avoid temptation because his word helps us. But in truth, we can never blame anybody else for what we're tempted with. It doesn't matter if we're addicted to something and we're trying to break that addiction. Ultimately, we have to live up and say we have our responsibility. And so today, I hope that you can grow in the word, can grow closer to God, and that you can walk with him. May God bless you on your journey today, and may you bless others with the blessings that he gives you as you trek this life.
That's today's Devo on Deep Treks. No matter how deep the questions or dark the doubts, there's always a path forward. Reach out at deeptreks.com with prayer needs or topics you'd like us to